To the lunch break on day 27 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. We're listening to the 7th day of evidence of Bob Lambert. This morning, I didn't get a chance to do a quick video update in the break because it was only 10 minutes long. This lunch break's only 40 minutes long, and we're already like 20 minutes into it, so this might be quite a short update as well. This has been by far the most interesting bit of the questioning of Bob Lambert. Finally, it feels like David Barr has got a sense of urgency about his questioning. He's interrupting, he's asking for more things from Lambert. I'm joined by Heather Mendick, who's been following it as well. What have you made of this morning's evidence?
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating that he didn't have this sense of urgency earlier, because we shouldn't be just pushing now. I mean, he's getting really frustrated because he said things like, aren't you clutching at straws and stuff like that, and these reports have this Helen Steele in two places at once, and point out all these inconsistencies. And it's very frustrating that he didn't really do this before, because we shouldn't be having him on today. Like, there's a witness we were talking, there's a witness who's supposed to be on all of today, and she's going to get pushed into the last 2 hours. People have come to see her evidence, and it's not fair on activists that he's been allowed to take this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the day's been quite interesting. He started quite strong with the whole thing about Belinda meeting John Dines. It wasn't credible. I mean, I don't think it's any way credible, Lambert's answers to that, about the idea that somehow he would have kept secret from Dines, who was coming into the London Greenpeace, coming into the LF movement, same sort of area as him, that he was in a relationship with Belinda Harvey. He claimed, no, not at all. It's just nonsense, really, isn't it?
Yeah. All of it's nonsense. And there's some also interesting stuff come out about reports of tensions within the unit between officers, which I hadn't been aware of before, which is very confusing to hear, because it's all HN this and HN that, because some of them are anonymised and given confidentiality. But there clearly was people who formed a little kind of clique amongst themselves.
A cabal.
Yeah, a cabal, that's the word. Yeah. And there was even an image where two reports we had of Bob Lambert, this other officer who was outside this cabal.
HM 109.
Yeah, who we heard from, right?
Yeah. We will be. He will be appearing in January as a witness as well.
Okay, and so he actually, in a pub, goes along to a meeting that expects to be sort of a kind of intelligence thing, and gets like almost beaten up. He grabs him, Bob Lambert grabs this guy, pushes him into the window, says, if you don't shut up about this person, then we're gonna come for you. It gives a totally different image of this unit than the one that the police are trying to do, which is like excellent officers, really professional. I mean, it is like little gangs emerging, right? Yeah,
very much. I mean, I think so. This all relates to the deployment of Stefan Scutt. We did a Spycops Info podcast episode about him when he first came up back in July. It seems very clear from the written evidence we've seen about Stefan Scutt that he was involved in some very serious organised criminality, and that he was part of this cabal with Lambert, with Dines, with HN8, who was an undercover officer who we're not allowed to know very much about at all, because of essentially he seemed to be an infiltrator into fascist groups, but we really know no detail about him. Scutt was being withdrawn from the SDS, but was still going to stay a special branch officer, and there was this huge resistance from his friends within the unit who sought to physically discipline senior officers on the matter. Now, HN 109 has got anonymity on his name, based, unlike any other officer, based on his fear of Bob Lambert and John Dines, as opposed to what any activist might do to him. So it'll be very interesting. He also was somebody who said that if he was forced to give evidence, he would kill himself. He has been called. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think his written evidence, there's two sets of his written evidence, to Operation Hearn, I believe it is, and to Operation Sparkler. I haven't seen any written statement to the inquiry yet. There may be one out there, I'm not sure. But it's incredibly damning of Lambert. I mean, one of the things I thought was most interesting in that exchange was there was a section of it where he referred to Lambert as a charismatic attention seeker, and Lambert said he was disturbed by this idea that he was charismatic. That Barr was like, it's not usual for somebody to be offended by being called charismatic.
Yes, but he said, I'm not offended by being called charismatic, I'm offended by being called an attention seeker, which clearly the guy has strung this thing along for ages. His evidence even today is he shows he's an attention seeker. He said, I'm not aware of having been either of those two things ever in my life. So the whole thing is ridiculous.
I mean, it's the most common descriptive description we've heard of Lambert from activists who knew him was that he was charismatic.
I mean, he had 4 deceptive sexual relationships in about 4 years.
Yeah.
And women fell in love with him. Guys looked up to him, talk about being inspired by him and mentored by him. I mean, what is your definition of charismatic if it doesn't include those kind of things? I mean, the whole thing is insane, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of the middle section of this morning was related to stuff that was covered by restriction order, so we can't really talk about. I would say that much like it's often the case, the stuff that's covered by the restriction order is the most ridiculous, the most out there, the most extreme. There's some very serious allegations, some defamation against some people who, let's just say, have got a very good character. And I think it's... Yeah, I mean, this was an area where Lambert really, really fell down. There was a lot of word salad. He had nothing very much clear to say at all. Quite difficult to talk about.
It. I mean, it goes back to Belinda and his being extracted, and that strategy of when he was going to be extracted. And he gets a bit more coherent when he speaks about Belinda, and always actually when he speaks about the women he deceived. I think partly because he's been told it doesn't look good to word salad then. Yeah. He kind of concedes a few more points. Not much though.
I mean, it feels like he's taking the bullet for the sexual abuse, but is drawing the line at any form of criminality.
Yes, I think that's true. But even on the sexual abuse, he really downplayed it. So he's talking about he had no idea that Belinda was, going to have problems afterwards. He doesn't remember putting her off buying a house. He can't imagine he'd have done that. All of this stuff, and you can just see that kind of manipulation, the way it's so easy for him to manipulate people, kind of just recurring in his life. And he denies that he was extracted from the field later because of this relationship. He says it was because there was probably going to be a Christmas IID campaign, and he would get information on where the evil Animal Liberation Front people were going to plant, commit arson over the Christmas holidays, which they never did. So it seems even now very implausible.
I mean, those reports were saying that one of the reasons why once he'd stayed a bit longer, he was going to have this very long holiday, basically. I mean, a whole of August off to go to Canada, but then also, from January to April to study leave. I mean, he really had a good gig. I mean, remember, he is one of the highest paid officers in the Metropolitan Police at that time, and he's getting huge amounts of paid leave. I mean, it's a ridiculous situation.
Yes. And his wife is referred to very elusively, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, we have now seen her written statement. She is still supportive of him. I mean, you get the impression this is, again, a woman who he has manipulated very deeply over a very long period of time. It's quite disturbing, really. I mean, it talks about her in the report as her being supportive of his work. He says he can't recall whether that was the case or not, which is a weird thing to deny remembering. But I mean, it's pointed out that she had no knowledge of the 4 sexual relationships he was having, the fact that he'd fathered a child, and the fact that he was involved in serious criminality, which he still denies. But yeah, I mean, I found some of the stuff he was saying about Belinda, again, very difficult, because he always talks about being fond of her, that she would think that Bob was a nice guy, that he was always did the best for her. I mean, it's offensive, and it really shows that these are the hallmarks of someone who is manipulating somebody, right?
Yes, and I mean, there's passages from Deep Deception, the book by the women some of the women who are manipulated into sexual relationships, and he's like, I've never heard this before. It's like, I don't even find that credible that he didn't read this. This is a very narcissistic guy, right, who's very concerned about his image. Even on self-interested grounds, he would have read the account that's given there and prepared. And even his lawyer would have told him, read this, you're going to be confronted with it. And he's like, no, I can't. I have no memory of this. I've never heard of this before. I mean, all of it's implausible. It's like he can't even tell what he's lying about anymore sometimes. I think he's convinced himself some of his lies are true, I think, for his own living with himself, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, possibly. I mean, I think there's definitely, I mean, there's whole sections, like, for example, the raid on Seaton Point, which was, a real turning point in his extraction. The fact the Special Branch had raided the flat which Belinda was ostensibly living in at the time. He exclaimed, no, this never happened. This never happened.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very strong on things which you kind of think, well, this would have made sense to do. This fits in with the pattern. We also saw a letter that he wrote a few days after, and he's like, no, that's from over a year earlier, which again is incredible. He says that, I mean, not least, there was something which Barr didn't pick up. He said, this would have been straight after the raid I had. The raid was on the Thursday. The letter was marked as the Wednesday. Very dodgy, very dodgy.
It's kind of weird, the things where I have no recollection of that, and the things where he has absolute certainty something did or didn't happen.
Yeah.
And that none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
And he's clearly just taking the piss out of this inquiry.
Yes, yeah.
And nobody is really, I mean, Barr is going a little way, but nobody's really saying you're taking the piss out of this inquiry and you need to sort of show a bit of respect. And he needs to be told that, but that's not going to happen because he's a police officer and he's MBE and he's commended, and that's carries into this, and that's part of the problem, right?
Absolutely, 100%. There is one little point I'd like to talk about. It's quite difficult because there's a lot of restriction orders around the things that it's about, but I think I can talk about it without breaking any restriction orders. He talks at length about this, these spare devices, that somehow Andrew Clark made 5 spare devices, and that these spare devices have been distributed to local ALF cells so they can make copies and they can do incendiary device attacks. And then there's these sequence of incendiary devices which are planted in stores in the early November of 1988, in the lead up to Christmas, and that they go off in the middle of the day and there's no press about it, which apparently is very demoralising to the ALF. Now, there's it's pointed out one of these devices is the same as Andrew Clark's devices, and it's planted in the Selfridges. This is the store that Bob Lambert says, Paul Gravett says, that Bob Lambert told him that he'd planted the device in that store. And if you remember, back when it was the planting of the devices in Debenhams in the July, that he had put only one in the Harrow store, and the other one he had said he didn't have the opportunity to plant. So therefore he had one spare device, which was Andrew Clark created. There's no suggestion from... Everybody's saying there was no 5 spare devices. This is a nonsense. But there was this one spare device. And all the evidence overwhelmingly points to the fact that Bob Lambert planted that one device in that Selfridges to give the spectre of there being a ALF Christmas campaign that was easily found, distinguished. There was no media report. He wrote the ALF press release that was released that didn't get picked up because he said in his report, don't worry, there's no need to pick these ones up because they all got frustrated. And I think this will be yet another. I think we can count like 4 very definite acts of extreme criminal damage, possibly 5 if you include the Golders Green McDonald's windows. There's the 2 Biorex attacks, there's the first Debenhams attack, and then this Selfridges attack.
And there's a possible arson of a home, right, that we don't even know about. But this is
that's the Biorex, yeah.
Oh, that's right. But this is why we need people like you, because I can't follow all of this detail. Like, I'm like, oh gosh, of course that. Yeah, it's really good that you're here kind of doing this kind of explanations of stuff, because I'm watching a lot of it, but I still can't get a lot of the connections, because it's, first of all, it's really hard to focus all the time because it's so boring listening to it, but also because it's really complicated.
Yeah. And there's so much of it is under cipher, so you've got to remember a lot of ciphers in your head. And I wouldn't say I was particularly good at that myself, but I think a lot of other people are, and I'm really grateful to working alongside so many other people who were so on the ball with so much detail about it all. But I think that's something which maybe was being missed about that I'm pretty sure that we can say that he planted that Selfridges device.
Makes sense. And it would be great if the website was, for this inquiry, made this stuff easier to decipher, so we could find ciphers, we could find connections. I find the website very difficult, and I think that's why the work of activists around this, explaining it, unpacking it, is really valuable. But I'm going to eat lunch now because we've got about 10 minutes or something.
Yes, well, we are due.
See everyone.
We are due to go back in about 5 minutes, and I haven't had my lunch yet. Thanks for joining us. See you all this afternoon.